Well, good evening, friends. So happy you're here tonight. My name is Mike Kopp with Colorado Concern. It's a delight for me to moderate a brief panel for you this evening on issues of the West. And my panelists and I, we were just discussing the West, about how proud each of us as really individual citizens of the West are of the West. And I wonder, is anybody else here proud of being of the West? It's so nice to know that we have in the United States Congress the Western Caucus, and we have with us tonight the chairman of the caucus, U.S. Representative Paul Gosar. We have also U.S. Representative Russ Fulcher, and we have Jeff Small, who is the executive director of the Congressional Western Caucus. Now, Paul Gosar is serving his fifth term in the United States Congress. He's a representative from Arizona's 4th Congressional District, which is located up in the Flagstaff area. Before being elected to Congress in 2010, Dr. Gosar owned his own dental practice and was a small businessman in Flagstaff for about 25 years with no prior political experience. Paul believes that the Constitution is the cornerstone of our republic and always pursues policies that allow for more individual liberty and less government involvement. Dr. Gosar was elected to serve as chairman of the Congressional Western Caucus for both the 115th and 116th Congresses, and is the current chairman. U.S. Representative Russ Fulcher, Congressman Russ Fulcher, is a fourth-generation Idahoan. He grew up on a dairy farm in Meridian. He has a great line about dairy farms. I hope he'll share it with you tonight. Congressman Fulcher spent 24 years in the technology sector, including at Micron Technology and Preco Electronics. He sold Idaho products in 60 countries around the world and in every state of the United States. During the 10 years that Rep. Fulcher served in the Idaho Senate, 6 years were spent as the Majority Caucus Chair. His signature legislation called the Grocery Tax Credit has returned some $800 million to Idaho's hardworking families and constitutes the largest single tax cut in Idaho's history. It's pretty good stuff. Jeff Small is the executive director of the Congressional Western Caucus and a senior advisor in Congressman Gosar's personal office. He previously served as Representative Gosar's legislative director, managing his Natural Resources Committee, Appropriations, Rules, Immigration, and Border Security portfolios for 3 years. Jeff has worked for several other Western Caucus and Colorado members, including current Western Caucus members, Scott Tipton, Ken Buck, and former members Scott McGinnis and Mike Kaufman. Jeff gets around. He's an impressive guy. Jeff has authored 15 bills and more than 20 amendments that have now become federal law. He grew up right here in Lakewood, Colorado. Won't you please join me in welcoming our panelists, these gentlemen on the Western Conservative, or the Western Caucus. Thank you. Thanks, gents.
Please welcome Representative Russ Fulcher from Idaho District 1 and Representative Paul Gosar from Arizona District 4 and Jeff Small, Executive Director of the Congressional Western Caucus.
Gentlemen, welcome. How's Colorado treating you so far?
Always well.
Well, good. I'm glad.
So far, so good.
Fantastic. Well, we're going to have a little bit of fun here tonight. We're talking about the West, and the West is such a special place, as we were sharing back there. And it's not just land. The West is also ideas. And Chairman Gosar, you've been in Congress for 10 years now. You're from a Western state, actually 2 Western states if you count your home state of Wyoming. And let's start with this. Everybody here relates to the need to create coalitions in Congress to defend our liberties, to defend our freedoms. Everybody here gets that at the Western Conservative Summit. Talk about doing that, but in the context of issues of the West, the values of the West. What are the values of the West, and how do you defend those?
Well, we have to look at what makes us great, and we believe in private ownership of land. We believe of conservation of land. We have the beauty and the majesty of mountains and deserts, and open spaces. We want that independence and freedom. Those are the things that, and energy independence. Those are some of the issues that we really aspire to, and what makes this country great, particularly the West.
Representative Fulcher, I'm going to turn to you now. I already told them that you had a great line about being in the dairy business. Russ Fulcher grew up as a dairy farm kid in Idaho, so no stranger to the West. So I'm teeing you up. It's just such a good line. I had to do it. Now, as a member of the caucus and a new member to Congress, as a member of the Western Caucus, you've dealt with a number of issues, but people here in the state know all about the Waters of the U.S. rule, and I know that the caucus has dealt with this. Could you give us a little insight on what you're doing on it, what the status of that is, how does the caucus view it, how do you view it, and tell us how it kind of ties into really defending liberty.
So if you go back and you look at about 1972, that's when the Clean Water Act was put into place. And basically the reason for that was to just make sure that there wasn't too many pollutants that was running into navigable waterways. Well, everything went reasonably well, Mike, until about, I think it was 2015 with the Obama administration and a rule that was put in place that changed the definition of navigable waterways to be literally just about anything, from a small irrigation ditch to even a large amount of puddled water. And it just made it so incredibly federal intrusive. I mean, when the federal government can define something that way, then they will have, and then put regulations on it accordingly, then they can control so much. So there's been litigation ever since on that. Our state, Idaho, got a stay on it, as did, I think, about 20 other states, so it's not formally in effect there. Unfortunately, in Colorado, with the Democrat leadership, Colorado stepped out of that lawsuit, so that actually applies right here in Colorado.
Talk to us about the implications of that.
So basically, with those rules in place, if the federal government really wanted to, they can require owners of property to get permission to do minor things, even moving dirt around on their own property. If that somehow could disturb a navigable waterway, it just, the list goes on. So the Western Caucus is on the front end of defending against that, and I'll let Congressman Gosar go into more detail because he knows the history better. However, the Western Caucus is on the front end of defending that, working with the EPA director in a two-phase process moving forward to try to get it fully eliminated. And if we can't get it fully eliminated, we'll get that redefined so that it is much more reasonable to deal with. And I think the 115th Congress, if I recall correctly, did pass legislation, and it was to redefine that, and the Obama administration vetoed it.
Yeah, maybe talk to us a little bit about your experience in the fight on Waters of the U.S. and maybe where we go from here.
Well, you know, I'm from a state of Arizona, and whiskey's for drinking, water's for fighting over. That's how important water is. If you got water and you got power, you got business. And that is really key. But when the government can control everything, they can also take it away. And so when you think about the little tidbit that anything that could be associated with drainage into a waterway, as is maybe temporary like a monsoon water, in a rut could be considered that. So the implications are horrendous. And part of the process was the Obama administration wanted to control the water. They wanted control. Remember, Barack Obama made the comment, we're moments away from fundamentally changing this country. Well, that's exactly what they were doing with Waters of the U.S. And so we put it on every single thing, every must-pass bill. We had an amendment that rescinded that. Hard part about it is the president vetoed it, and then on a lot of other things that went to conference committee, the Democrats required it to come out. So the best we could do was actually have administratively it be nothing. But what that means is that the next president, if they want to be or if they're Bernie Sanders or somebody else, like Kamala Harris, they could actually change that immediately. And that's the problem. What Barack Obama was doing was weaponizing the government. You heard Tom Fenton. It was no different in the EPA. It was no different with Interior. It was no difference across any of the agencies. So that's how important that fight was.
So, Mike, if I could just add one thing to that.
Please.
Think about just if you have a liberal mindset and you want to change the world, you want to make your environment much more socialistic, what do? Well, you go after things like healthcare, you go after things like education, and you go after things like water, because that is huge ramifications, especially on the western states. And so that is part of that liberal agenda. And what Representative Gosar said about the control, that's what it's all about for them.
Colorado is one of the only states where all of our water actually flows out of the state, because we're a high mountain state. It all goes out. It's kind of amazing when you think about it that way.
Well, you got to think that Arizona is sitting down there as the last terminal end of the Colorado. So
Yeah, what was the name of that river again?
The Colorado River.
Colorado River. Okay,
Yeah.
just double checking on that. All right, thank you.
I might just add
Your
before we
golf
move
courses
on,
look pretty
if you
good.
would- might just add before we move on, if you would, Mike. I mean, these guys are exactly right. So it was about government control. It was a land and water grab. It's really the federal government wants to be able to tell you what to do with your property, and that was unprecedented, what we saw with the Obama administration. If you look at what they did abusing the Antiquities Act, more than 34 new or expanded designations of national monuments, and they locked up more than 535 million acres of land and water. A lot of that was water, but 535 million acres. The federal footprint is 635 million acres already, so it's, they had this quest and this pursuit to lock up our land, attack traditional fuels, prevent people and industry from responsibly developing these land and using our resources, and it was all about government control, and really the Western Caucus has been leading the fight to push back against that overreach and those land and water grabs.
Jeff, you have some wonderful colleagues here, but you have a big job as the executive director of the Western Caucus. It must be a little bit like herding cats sometime. I mean, it must be a little bit like herding
Not so much.
Republican cats.
Republican cats. How'd you get into this line of work? Just give the folks a minute. You're a Colorado kid. How'd you wind up doing this?
Yeah, sure. So I was a political science major in college and came back and started on the ground working on campaigns. Worked on a governor campaign, a couple congressional campaigns here at the state level, and worked my way up. And then went to D.C. about 9 years ago to work for Congressman Tipton, and worked for him for 3 years. And I've been working for Congressman Gosar ever since. But he's got a great delegation in Colorado. They're all the Republicans are members of the Western Caucus. Should be very proud of them. They're the ones that have President Trump's back. They're fighting for you guys every day. And we do have 75 members, so keeping 75 people happy is it's a tough job, but we've got a good crew, and they're active and aggressive, and they're fighting for you each and every day.
Well, please, yep. I mean, this stuff matters. People don't know the ins and outs about these battles. Thank you for taking them on. So we just have a few minutes left, and I want to hit two quick topics. One has to do with mining, and another one has to do with the environment. We'll have a little bit of fun on the environment. Just real quick, Representative Gosar, our state seal has a couple of unique items on it that folks here would find germane to our discussion tonight. One of those is that it says nil sine numine, nothing without providence. It's beautiful, beautiful. But the other thing that's on there, particularly relevant tonight, is there's a pick, owing to our long tradition of being a hard rock mining state. Mining's important. We generate a lot of commerce, a lot of livelihood, our defense industry, on and on and on and on. I wonder if you could just say a word about the importance of mining and mineral development in the United States, particularly in the West, what the caucus is doing on that.
Well, Arizona is no second fiddle either. We're known as the 5 C's, and one of those C's is copper for actually mining. So it's critical. Everybody who's got a cell phone, raise your hand. What you need mining. Everybody in your cars, you have copper. Who has some solar panels? Anybody out there? You need copper. If you do not have that, you're going to be dependent upon the rest of the world. And this country was blessed by being no second fiddle to anybody with the abundance of energy and minerals. From copper to rare earths to the energy renaissance, it is important that we be self-dependent, not dependent upon the likes of Russia or China. And you saw the threat recently. when we're actually doing the tariffs, trying to control the out-of-control Chinese government. What did they threaten us with? Rare earths. And why is that? Is that they've cornered the market. Over 90% they control. We have them abundantly here, Colorado, Arizona, Montana, Idaho. They're everywhere here. And by the way, we do it better than anywhere else in the world. This is where wealth comes from. These are the great paying jobs. These are the $80,000 to $160,000 jobs with benefits. This is what gets it all started. That and farming and timber sales, those are what really get things going. So it is dependent upon this renaissance of mining, energy, timber, and that actually makes this country tick. So it means everything to us to be sufficient.
I love the fighting spirit. Thank you for that. Representative Fulcher, there's a plan floating around in the halls of Congress, and the Wall Street Journal, one of the Wall Street Journal editorial writers, had a great word for it. And she said the plan was bonkers. And actually, I think bonkers is an understatement. The plan is called the Green New Deal. And have you guys heard of this? Will you tell us, it's kind of no laughing matter. What is going on with that? What's the caucus
First time
doing?
I heard Green New Deal, I immediately mentioned to my communications person, this should be the Red New Disaster, okay? And she said, well, wait a minute, before you call it Red New Disaster, I meant red like communist red, but she says, before you do that, you don't want Republican red to be attached to that, so I haven't been calling that publicly. But it is bonkers, and it's a war on anything fossil fuel, which means anything that you've got with a combustion engine would be something that would be phased out over the course of time. Would have a huge, massive impact on our economy. It's a war on our economy. It's a war on our way of life. If this thing were to ever be put in place, it would set the U.S. back tremendously, because I can promise you, China is not going to follow the Green New Deal, okay? And neither is Russia, and neither is any of our adversaries around the world. So it is bonkers, but here's the problem with it. There are some people that actually start buying this thing, okay? Or it at least pushes the conversation to the left, which is a bad thing. You saw that it was actually forced to a vote after all these presidential candidates said, hey, we're going to sign up for this thing, 0 votes, okay? 0 votes. So when it comes down to it, oh, not really. But we have to take this seriously because of that pushing the conversation left. And our energy has given us a tremendous situation in worldwide balance of power. This and that mindset threatens it.
And I want to jump in, because what this is the continuation of that Barack Obama aspect of fundamentally changing this country. You think about it, a free lunch with no work, a free guaranteed pay, education, health care for none, no fossil fuels. What it does is it builds America into victims instead of being empowered to be the solutions and success stories that America was, and is highlighted by the West. There's nothing good about this bill, nothing. But the great news is every time she opens her mouth, it's an opportunity for us to teach, a teaching moment.
Well, there you have it. Jeff, a final word.
I would just add, it has nothing to do with the environment, and even Ocasio-Cortez's chief said that yesterday. He said it's about taking over and fundamentally transforming America. I mean, if it was about emissions, the United States was the world leader in emissions reduction in 2015, 16, and 17, and it was because of American ingenuity and innovation and what they're doing in the oil and gas sector. And if they really cared about reducing carbon emissions, they would support oil and gas, but they don't. They're attacking projects like Jordan Cove, so that would be a pipeline that transports natural gas up to Oregon from Colorado. Be a ton of jobs here in Colorado. But they're opposed to it. Why? Because they just don't like natural gas, even though the safest way to transport natural gas is in a pipeline. It's 99.999% efficient. So it doesn't make any sense. It's really about they want to prop up renewables, they want to attack traditional fuels, and they want to tell you how to manage your lives and attack certain industries and help out others. So just do your research and read through it. And follow us on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, at Congressional Western Caucus or at Western Caucus. We do a lot of good stuff. We put out a lot of press releases, a lot of messages. We have President Trump's back. Our members are active, and they do a fantastic job, and we'd love to stay in touch with you guys, and please stay up to date on what we're doing.
Well, that's a good place to end. Won't you say thank you to them one more time? Thank you. Thank you.